Guys, who wants to know who the 10 most broken champions in the mid lane are going to be for the next 2 weeks? Well, in this video, you are about to find out, so make sure you stick around for the whole thing. And what's up, by the way, this is Eggs, and because I'm such a nice guy, I'm also going to give you pretty much everything you need before you get into game. So whether that's rune pages, summoner spells, your skill order so you know, and also the items that you want to be building on these champions, and we'll get into some of the changes that have happened in 13.1 so you guys understand why these champions are on this countdown. And guys, if you do actually want to master any of these champions on the mid lane itself, far more important than actually just knowing who the most OP picks are, then check out the GameLeap website. If you don't legit climb, like at least a division, from watching one of my mid lane high elo bot analyses, I'll be super surprised, honestly. So check out those links down below and let's get in to the countdown. Now, coming in at number 10, we have a champion who's going to benefit from the Sarac's Embrace buff. This is Cassiopeia. But for Cassio, because you rely so much on mana, Sarac's Embrace is always going to be a core item, but the changes to the item now where you're actually getting AP from the item rather than ability haste, and then also you're getting the lifeline passive back, so that shield based on your mana. This is really useful for Cassio, and you're also getting a flat 10 ability haste from the item as well. This is insane for a champion who scales so well with AP, so for Cassio this is huge. Also, I think because there's more HP in the game now, and tanks might come back because of the Jack Show changes, Liandra's Anguish, because that is your preferred mythic, has even more value. Even in the mid lane itself, because Rod of Ages has been buffed and there's more HP from the item, Liandra's tick damage, well, it's just even better, right? So Cassiopeia is number 10, and I should also say here, guys, as well, that these stats are from 13.1. They might be from different ranks, but they are actually from 13.1, not 12.23. Now, moving on to number 9. If you guys want to play an attack damage mid laner, then Yasuo is a really good choice. You can see that in Diamond and above, he's an S tier champion with over a 50.5% win rate in over 3,000 matches. Now, why is Yasuo strong? Because nothing really affected him this patch? Well, honestly, it's just Yasuo. And maybe because mages are back, Yasuo does pretty well into these for the most part. Because of his mobility, because of his wind wall, you can cuck a lot of mid laners. Just make sure, guys, if you're going to play Yasuo, try to play around your passive. And don't just start spamming your E through minion waves. Try to actually have a purpose with each minion you hit. Way too many low elo Yasuo players will just go nuts on a minion wave because they skill their E level 2 and then they overextend and then they die. We've seen it all before, right? The 0-10 memes, so do be a little bit careful of that. But Yasuo number 9. Now, moving on to number 8 on the countdown, well, another attack damage mid laner who honestly is just better than Yasuo statistically speaking, and honestly probably innately speaking, this is Jayce. Now, I haven't mentioned Jayce in a mid lane video for ages, so it's kind of exciting. Now, the reason Jayce is included here is because of the fat buffs he got in 13.1. So the fact your base damage went up, the fact your melee Q and W deal more damage, especially your Q, you're getting an extra 30 base damage at level 9, or 5 points in your Q, which of course you'll be maxing first. This is just like unreal. I don't know why they did this to Jayce, but if you are actually going to play in the mid lane, why not think about picking him? You have really good pushing power, really good poke, and there are even some builds. I know this is recommending phase rush here. This will be the most consistent setup, but you can go stuff like first strike with absolute focus to maximize the damage and gold you get from the keystone. So there are some other interesting setups. And by the way, these stats are from master and above. And as far as the build goes, don't feel like you have to go ability haste boots, so lucid. Of course you can go merc treads. Most of the time you're going to be playing against AP champions, so merc treads are really useful in the mid lane for Jayce. But he is number 8. Now, moving on to number 7, an even better attack damage champion than both Jayce and Yasuo, this is Akshan. And a bit like Yasuo, right? Nothing has really changed for Akshan in the mid lane in terms of his actual self, so there's been no direct buffs, and there's been no real indirect buffs, but maybe because mages again are back on the menu, Akshan against these immobile champions does extremely well because of his amazing gap closing potential. It makes it very difficult for mages to step forward, and they really have to be careful with their movement and positioning, and guess what? In most elos, people won't be. You can pounce on them. Now, this rune page here that's being recommended, this is with Fleet for work. Now, I know that some people might be running press the attack, but Fleet into poke lanes is really going to help you out. Also, the movement speed you get, it's useful to kite enemy champions. Lots of champions in the mid lane have skill shots as well, so it makes it difficult to hit you and actually just out sustain you during the laning phase. When you pair this with Shield Bash, which enhances your passive shield, makes it very difficult to beat this guy in those short trades. Just make sure, guys, that is what you're doing with this setup. Of course, if you press the attack, especially if you're running something like Ignite, as your other summoner spell with Flash, you can go for all ins, so just have that in mind. Also, as far as your build goes, you can go Kraken Slayer, Borg, and like I just said for Jayce, Merc Treads, because the mid lane is going to have a lot of magic damage champions and some scary CC, the Tenacity, even the Magic Resist, they are probably invaluable in most matches. So Akshan is one of the premier attack damage mid laners, and he is number 7. Now, coming in at number 6 on the countdown, I know that some people are going to be questioning this, because we don't really put Ryze on these videos, right? Because Ryze, well, typically in solo queue, has had win rates of like 45% like the whole of last season, right? And apart from maybe the start when he was picked and banned in pro play, but that's how he's going to be, guys, at the moment. This dude is going to be picked and banned in pro play all the time, unless the enemy team has like a specific counter to Ryze. So maybe like Cassiopeia, maybe Anivia does very well, Veigar does well, but in solo queue, the champion still has so much going for it. Even if you are in a hard matchup, the pushing power you have, the roaming potential, and because Rod of Ages and Seraph got some massive buffs that we kind of detailed earlier for Cassiopeia, they have helped Ryze out so much. Those are your two core items, right? So you're getting these first. You'll feel their buffs as early as possible. Just make sure as far as your rune page goes, this one with phase rush, so you're taking conditioning and overgrowth, this really helps your scaling. And when you pair something like overgrowth in particular with Rod of Ages, the extra HP you get, especially as the game progresses, you become so tanky and just difficult to kill. So you might have to be a little bit careful, guys, about picking Ryze in the mid lane, but you can see that in Challenger across the world to have close to a 52% win rate, and by the way, if you change this to career, it's like 54%. That is when you know this champion is busted. He should not have this high win rate. So Ryze is number 6, and honestly, I could put him a lot higher, but I know that in lower elos, he is not as good. Now, coming in at number 5 on the countdown, this is a champion, despite some recent nerfs, has honestly been like indirectly buffed this patch. This is Syndra. Now, before this patch, you probably weren't going to build Sarah's Embrace on Syndra. Now, why are you building it now? Well, like we mentioned for Cassiopeia, right? You're getting AP from the item. So for the mana you have, you're getting AP based off that, no longer ability haste. And for a champion who really wants AP, to be able to one-shot people and damage them from afar, this is huge. That's why you can see at the bottom of your screens, Mythic and core items, Sork Shoes, obviously, still good, Looter's Tempest, of course, and then Seraph Embrace. You're not getting Shadow Flame here, you're getting Seraph. And to be honest, because you're going this tier route, I actually think it's just better if you guys take TP, because in pretty much every matchup, you're going to be starting D-Ring. So by having TP, what you can actually do is recall in the early game at some point, based on the wave state, get your tier of the goddess, and TP back to mid lane and stack your tier ASAP. Particularly if you get some sort of early advantage, it is huge and so snowbally now because of how good Seraph is and the actual AP it's giving you. So Syndra is number 5, still extremely strong despite the nerfs to some of her abilities a few patches ago, and I'm sure anyone who has played against the Syndra, you will know what I'm talking about. Now, coming in at number 4, we just talked about Seraph's Embrace getting buffed, right? Well, what other champions in the mid lane or what other champion will appreciate this? Well, Anivia is definitely one of them, and not just Seraph's, right? Rod of Ages as well. It's impossible for me, guys, not to put her on this countdown, and you can see that in Challenger across the world, Anivia, an S-tier champion, 54% win rate, she has to be here, right? Even though she might not be picked and honestly like banned that much, when you do play against one, you are going to feel the power. Now, of course, you might have some hard matchups as Anivia, right? Anything with good range. So maybe Seraph, Vex is very scary because she can jump on you. Corki, the lane isn't too scary for him, so he probably can just scale, especially once he gets to level 6, right? And into the mid to late game. So there are certain picks that do well into Anivia. So you might have to be a little bit careful of blind picking her. And if you are going to blind pick her, I'd highly recommend banning Seraph. It is the big counter pick to her. But innately speaking, that's why she's on this countdown. Now, speaking of one of those champions who really count as Anivia, this is Vex coming in at number 3, starting off the top 3. Now, why is Vex here? Now, honestly, like nothing really changed for Vex right this patch because Archangels has been buffed, Rod of Ages has been buffed. So it's almost like other mid laners got better while she stayed the same. Well, the reason is because of those Q buffs earlier in season 12, right? So last year when Riot decided to buff your Q, so your Q's cooldown is now 4 seconds at level 9. That's rank 5 points in your Q. That is just way too oppressive. Like, I don't care what anyone says. You are just queuing like non-stop. The damage it deals, if it procs your passive as well, you instantly have kill pressure. Very obnoxious to deal with. Also, the extra AP ratio Riot gave you in that same patch, it just makes this champion too difficult to play against for the majority of players and champions. Of course, you might have some hard matchups as Vex because you are kind of immobile, but another reason you're so strong is because of your amazing gap closing potential with your Shadow Surge. This being able to catch out enemy champions who make mistakes, and guess what? Lots of people, especially in lower elos, are going to be making mistakes. So Vex, you can pounce on them, one-shot them with your Ignite, and GG, well played. So Vex is number 3. Now, one champion who absolutely destroys a Vex and the number 1 champion on this countdown, this is the best attack damage mid laner for 13.1, this being Ireilia. Look at these stats for me in Diamond and above. A 53% win rate with this rune page, pair this with Blade of the Ruined King, and overall a 51.5% win rate and a 20% ban rate. This champion is, well, I don't know if she's actually difficult to play because I've seen Ireilia's miss every single skill shot and just auto attack people to death, but let's be real, the champion does have some sort of skill requirement, but she's so good with this rune page and with this build, so Blade of the Ruined King, and because you're in the mid lane like I mentioned for the other attack damage champions, getting Mertreads and then into Wit's End for Ireilia because you value attack speed, this is just super busted. And like I said, you counter so many champions in the mid lane, particularly those who are benefiting from the Rod of Ages and Serra's Embrace buffs. So if we're talking champions like Anivia, she has to be very careful. Ryze has to be very careful. But yes, Ireilia in the mid lane if your team does need some sort of attack damage mid laner, and because lots of AP junglers are pretty popular at the moment, whether we're talking Echo, Evelynn, Elise, they are picked a fair bit, so having Ireilia in your champion pool is certainly a good idea. But the number one champion, guys, for 13.1 in the mid lane, and honestly in the game itself, this has to be Kassadin. I don't know how you cannot put him on this countdown. Rowan getting buffed, Serrat's getting buffed, the recent buffs to Kassadin as well. These have just piled up and he's become so broken. I still can't believe he got away with like not getting nerfed in this patch, but hey, this is Riot Games and that's what makes the balanced team the balanced team. And it's kind of interesting here in Challenger across the world at the moment. You can see over a 56% win rate. What people are doing is actually taking their E first now because of the changes and maxing it first. Very, very powerful. Also, if you just look at the build for me, taking Merc Treads instead of something like Sorcerer's Shoes. You still get the AP from Serras now because of the changes, so Merc Treads in the mid lane, it just means you're going to be locked down for less. And take into account as well, if you are going to go something like Conqueror here, or even the Precision tree as your secondary tree, you might be taking Tenacity, right? Tenacity, despite getting nerfed, Merc Treads kind of make up for it in a way. So those were the 10 best mid laners, guys, based on the changes. And remember, these stats are real from 13.1. They are live. Any questions, any of your thoughts? I'd love to know what you guys think of the mid lane. Let us know down below. And if you did learn something from the video, if you do want us to continue making them, leave a like on the video. And until our next Season 13 upload, this has been Ace. Peace.